Mm-hmm. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the HEMA Pandemic Livestream class. We had a request on our channel to do some work on the Saber, the military Saber. We've got a couple different versions here. This is a 1796 pattern military Saber from Cold Steel. Then we have a Hungarian style Saber. And you can see the difference in the width and the size of the blade. So these are two different styles of sabers, and because there's a distinct difference in the weight between them, they will fight a little bit differently. Today, the one I want to talk about is this one, however, the 1796. The manuscript that we study from here at DEMAS is written by John Taylor, published in 1804. Napoleon took over France, and the whole Napoleonic Wars began in 1803. This was published in 1804. So this is an an American, I believe, that was engaged, an Englishman, that was engaged in the Napoleonic Wars. So this is a guy that used this. His manuscript covers the Saber, the Spadroon, and the Broad Sword. We're going to talk just a little bit today about the Saber and touch just a tiny bit on the Broad Sword. But with the Broad Sword, I do want to make one caveat. I don't have a broadsword here. So I'm using a Scottish back sword. Not quite the same, but it'll allow us to practice and do the same kind of thing. What I want to talk about today is 3 guards, 3 cuts, and 3 actions. The first guard that we're going to do is called medium guard. And what John Taylor says with medium guard, you hold it like this with, he calls this the iron strip, or the stirrup. Has several different names. I'm going to call it the stirrup. The stirrup, right directly below the point, and he says this guard is seldom used, if ever, but only when you don't know which side they're going to attack to, because it gives me little to no protection at all. So this is just a guard that I'm going to start in because I'm not sure where he's going to go. Then from medium guard, we're going to leave our elbow tucked in. You'll notice when you look at my hand, you cannot see my elbow because it's directly behind my hand, which is directly behind my stirrup. When Taylor talks about holding the sword, he says you should hold the stirrup right over the middle knuckles of your fingers. And then when you are striking, you're leading with the middle knuckles of your fingers. That does a couple things. One, that gives my hand protection. And the other thing it does is it lines up the edge with the long bone of my arm. So when I cut, my sword is in line with my arm. If I hold it so that I'm just at the stirrup is over the first, when I hold it, you'll notice the edge is not quite in line with my arm. It's actually just a little bit behind my arm. If I grab it and hold it like a hammer, now it's really off. So I want to make sure to hold the stirrup over the middle knuckles of my finger. This guard here is what he calls outside guard. And Taylor says you can tell a beginning saberist because they'll not move their arm, but bend their wrist, and they'll get this position. However, with a lighter weapon in the Hungarian style, that's what they do. But when I'm fighting with this big, heavy wrist breaker, I don't want to do that because that's slow and it puts me in a weak position. So from medium guard, I leave my elbow there and I turn out my hand. to outside guard. From outside guard, I'm going to go back to medium guard and then bring my arm across. So now I'm in inside guard. My hand is low. My forte is in front of my sternum, giving me that defense that I need. Medium guard, outside guard, inside guard. From there, the last guard we're going to do today is St. George. And from inside guard to get to St. George, I'm going to drop my point forward, bring my hand back, so I'm looking directly under my sword at my opponent's head. One of the common mistakes that people make with the saber or any sword is that when they go to St. George, you'll hit me in the head, I'm not going to move.
Yes, sir.
When they go to St. George, they hold it up here. And this is especially dangerous with a saber because of the curve. And if he just pulls his hand down a little bit, it slides right off. And he doesn't need to move as much as he would if he had a straight blade. The curve actually helps him leave my blade. So when I do St. George, I want to hold it so I'm looking just under the sword at my opponent's face. So now when he hits me in the head and I go here, that's all I get. And if he pulls down, it's very difficult for him to get off of my sword because he has to pull back. One of the things Taylor says is that St. George is not for lying under my opponent's blade, only for stopping it. What that means is if he throws that cut at me, I'm not going to do this and then stay there because he can just push right through that or leave me or do a myriad of things. So St. George is only to find their blade and then you move out of it as soon as you've stolen the force and the energy from their blade. So once again, our guards are medium guard to outside guard. When you're practicing this, make sure your wrist is straight. We don't want any bend in the wrist. It's as if I were hitting a punching bag. I punch my dummy. If my hand is even a little bit bent, it folds and I hurt myself. So I need to make sure that I've got that straight line. My sword is no different. The stirrup is over the middle knuckles and I'm rotating through the radius and ulna to get my defense into place, not through my wrist, because this is too heavy. One of the nicknames for this sword was wrist breaker. There's our guards that we're going to use. Our cuts. At this period in time, cuts were numbered, 1 through 7. We're going to be looking at, well, I said 3. We're going to do a couple more. So 1 is I'm going to start from outside guard. I'm going to dip my point towards him, lifting up my hand. So I've got my point down and my hand high. Pull my point back. Then as I do this action, I'm going to pull my elbow down. And you'll notice my sword is in front of my body the whole time. Back to outside guard, or to inside guard, to perform my cut. So from outside guard, point forward, down, pull it back, drop the elbow down, and cut. And then come back to outside guard. There's my cut 1. Cut 1 is descending from my right side to my left side. This is not like dueling sabers or modern sabers where I'm doing little flicks. This beast is way too heavy for that. So when I'm facing my opponent and we're both in outside guard, because at this point, if I just throw a simple attack, he easily defends that. Let's switch sides, please. Easy peasy. So instead, from here, I bring my point at him. Go ahead and defend it, okay? And then I can cut to the inside. I'm still doing a cut 1. It's descending from my right to my left side, coming in at his left side, but it does not need to be his shoulder. Once he's made a cover, I can choose my target. So once again, from both outside guard, point forward, and then I can just cut to the inside. We cut in this fashion for a very specific reason. What if he doesn't defend himself? What instead if he countercuts me? So give me just that pop out.
Okay.
As soon as I drop down. This is another guard that we didn't talk about, which is hanging guard. And then I can leave it and countercut. We have a drill that we can work on, and this is a flow drill. So we'll do that same thing, and as I'll launch my attack, he'll just countercut me. And I've got that defense there, and then as I drop it down, he pulls back. Now, did you hear that click, click? That's because I hit his stirrup, which means he has it in the right place, and it's over his knuckles. If he was holding it incorrectly, can we do that again?
Yes, sir.
I come through, he countercuts me, I cover that, and I take his knuckles right here. Whereas if he's holding it correctly, his knuckles are protecting it. Let's get closer. I want them to see this. So hold it in correctly. He's here, and it just takes his knuckles right there. Switch sides with me. And there's the cut to his knuckles. If he's holding it correctly, and he does that, by the time I get to his knuckles, pull your hand back. He's moved the target out of the way. Hold it incorrectly and do that same thing. And I take his wrist. It's so important that you hold your saber correctly. This is not a lot of protection, but it's enough. And it's important that we learn that so we don't need to panic when there's a strike coming in towards our hands. Because it's all there as long as you use it correctly. So let's do that again. We're both an outside guard. I bring it towards him. He countercuts me here. If I get lazy on my cut and I don't leave my forte in front of my body, I get hit. Let's do it again. You're going to make contact. Okay. So I launch. Because I was not protecting myself with my forte. That's a cut 1. Cut 2 is descending from my left side to my right side. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to start an outsider guard again. I'm going to dip it down, pull it back just like I did. But this time, instead of pulling my elbow in to get my sword back to my point back to my right side for a cut 1, as I come through here, I pull my elbow down, and that gives me a cut 2. So let's do the same drill. Okay. This time, go ahead and defend yourself with your sword.
Yes, sir.
So we're both an outside guard. He comes through, and I countercut his wrist. Or not countercut, I cut his wrist, or if I step with it, with a lunge, let's go real slow. Mm-hmm. And I can make the strike. So cut 1, descending from my right side to my left side. Cut 2 from my left side to my right side. I didn't touch your hand, did I?
Nope.
Good. So cut 1, cut 2. Cut 3 is a rising blow from my right side to my left side. Cut 4 is a rising blow from my left side to my right side. I don't want to spend a lot of time on those because the third cut I'm going to do today is a cut 7. And the cut 7 is straight down on his head. So if we take, let's go ahead and I'm going to do cut 2.
Yes, sir.
Parry it with a cover with my thrust, cover my thrust, and then cover my two. You're breaking your wrist.
Thank you.
Let's do that again. So we start here. You'll notice another thing that's happening here. Let's do it again and we'll stop as soon as we make contact.
Yes, sir.
Come closer. We're not doing this hard chop into edges. He's putting that in the way and I'm sliding off of it. I am not creating saw teeth on my sword if I do it correctly. So there's cut two. Cut one. He covers the inside and he goes to cover the outside again, and I can cut through and take his arm, or with a lunge, take him in the shoulder or the face. If he does nothing and I begin this action, I'll just turn it my cut into a thrust. And that's why it's important for him to actually respond to what I'm giving him. If he doesn't, I can still attack him. Let me move this real quick. So there's our 3 cuts and our 3 guards. The next thing I want to talk about is drilling those. So I'm going to do cut 1. You're going to do cut 7.
Okay.
All right. So defend against my cut 1, and then cut 7. Now, don't move. Go ahead and take your sword off. I was not thinking. I should have only gone to here because that's all I needed to do. Let's do that again. And then as soon as that happens, I'm going to dip it down and do another cut 1. So again. Do it again. Then I add my lunge to it. Ready?
Ready.
And I do it correctly. Into my cut. Now you'll notice when I'm doing the release from St. George, let's do it again. I go to here, I stopped it in St. George, and then just lifted my hand up. My forte is still in front of my body. Then to make the cut, all I do is I don't pull my hand down. I pull my elbow down. Watch what happens if I pull my hand down. See that? See how that opens up my head? But if I pull my elbow down, my blade is in front of me the whole time. Another lesson that I teach here at DEMAS a lot is just because you hit them does not mean they're done trying to hit you. So you need to make sure that you always have your blade between their blade and your body. Here at the school, we call that the true cross. So there's our drill for cut 1. Let's do that one more time. Into the blow. When I do drill 2, you're going to cover in outside guard.
Yes, sir.
So I thrust, he goes to inside guard, and I get that strike. Do that again. So there's that. Now, as he does his defense, he's going to turn that into a cut 1 at my neck. This could be a cut 5, which is a horizontal cut, but we're going to keep it as a 1 since that's the one we talked about. From there, he countercuts into me. And there's his counter strike. Let's do that again. Okay, one more time. So now, to keep that from happening, I'm going to, as I throw it, let's switch sides, please. Move a little closer. So we do the same drill.
Okay.
I drop down, I cut from here. I'm just going to counter cut into it with a 1 towards his hand. And it's important that I'm targeting his hand with this, because that allows me to manipulate where on his blade I strike. I'm defending myself, but this defense is almost more of a counterattack for defense as opposed to just a defensive action. Let's do that again. And then from there, I'm going to turn my hand over and just cut up. That's where we get into a cut 3. General way, easy way to remember this. Sorry, that was a cut 4 because it came from my left. Easy way to remember this. From my right side are odd numbers. 1, 5, 3. From my left side are even numbers. 2, 6, 4. So from my right side, I have my odd numbers cuts. From my left side, I have my even number cuts. Just simple, easy way to remember it. Let's go and do that drill again. I throw. Now you see how far his sword moves down. Watch what happens if I make this a defensive action, not a counter action. Ready?
Ready.
How easy is that to turn into a cut 2?
This is very easy.
Because I've given him the impetus to make that cut. I've given him the energy he requires for that. Go and do that nice and slow.
Yes, sir.
And it just drives right through. Do that again. This time I'm going to do a counter cut, offensive as opposed to defensive.
Yes, sir.
And that's with the lighter sword. Try it with this one. So we come through. Look how that just leaves me here, ready for my action. So there is a distinct difference between doing a defensive action defensively or doing a defensive action offensively. And we all have heard the adage, a good defense is a good offense. And it's true, especially in sword fighting, because that's going to disrupt their time and their placement. There are movement drills for cut 1 and cut 2. And I'm going to do this just to here so you can relax for a second.
Yes, sir.
So I do a cut 1, my hand moves, my foot moves, I drop down, I cover myself. There's a cut 1, back to outside guard. If he countercuts me, I bring it down. As I'm here, I just return to St. George, dip my point down, and continue my cut 1. So the difference is with no counteraction, there, with a counteraction, there. That's the difference. Then when I have a cut 2, I begin the same way, and then I bring it back to inside guard. Again, to inside guard. You'll notice at no time when we're doing these drills are we stopping the sword. What is stopping the sword is either his weapon or his body. I am not stopping the sword. He is stopping the sword. And it's important to understand that, because if I try to do that, I can really hurt myself, my arm, my shoulder, my back. I don't want to risk it. So cut 2, thrust, cut all the way down, back to inside guard. Then if he defends it, I begin my action, I pull this down, he defends that. And then as I do it, instead of going to inside guard, as I cut through, I cut into his forte. Then turn my sword flat and countercut. So that would be if we also, I do want to point out, can thrust with this. If we get into contact, so close your line. That's the nice thing about the curved blade. So as soon as we make contact, I can drive around his weapon, and that's one of the benefits of the curved blade. I can also use it to, watch this. So I'm throwing my cut. I'm now using my false edge to take his fingers.
Move up a little bit closer so they can actually see that.
So I'm gonna do it from here. So I attack, and look how that just lays on his thumb. And I can put the point into his wrist as well. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is something Taylor talks about, he calls it bearing. Bearing. And that's when I'm putting pressure on my opponent's blade. So I come through and I throw a cut 2. And he defends it. Now, from here, I lunge, and now I've got the power to cut through. The bearing is done with a lunge so that I move his foible. No, I want to change the way I say that. So that I move my forte onto his foible. And it sounds like the same thing. So I move his foible to my forte. But it's not, because if I'm moving his foible to my forte, he can remove his foible from my forte. But if I'm moving my forte to his foible, I'm controlling his sword. And it's a very nuanced difference, but it is a difference. Let's do that again. I launch my attack, lunge, and then I can just cut through from there. One of the nice things about this one is he also says in bearing that I can do a cut 4 off of this. I launch my attack. He defends that. I bear, leave his sword, and cut up underneath, and then recover. So let's do that again. You good?
Good.
Let me get back on guard. Oh, there I did it with a 2. Because look how far he pushed his hand out. Why? Why did you push it out?
Because when you took your forte to my foible, the pressure back, I want your sword away from me. So my instinct is to push your blade away.
And because his blade went so far out, it was very easy for me to just leave his blade and cut right back through. And imagine taking a 3-pound beast like this right to the chest. It's going to slow you down.
Definitely.
Let's do that again, but to this side.
Yes, sir.
Ready?
Ready.
Now there's my lunge. I bear. Then, now see how his sword is still by his face? So I'll leave it and come underneath and then recover. If he pushes the sword away, let's go back on guard. And he goes there, I'll just leave it here and cut into his chest that way. And then once I hit him in the chest or the face, I'm going for his chest because of no mask, I then recover back onto guard. And you'll notice I'm back weighted on this. In this style, we're very much back weighted and then lunging into it so that it is closer in relation to the rapier than it is to the modern fencing stance. And the last action I want to talk about is battering. Battering is a beat. I'm beating his sword out of the way. So we're both on guard. And from here, I do a cut 5. Even though he went for that defense, I still have that opening. I can do it with either edge. And it's important to understand that when I'm doing that, we're both on guard, my hand goes forward like I'm doing the same action, but the curve and using the fault edge means that when I strike his blade, look how I'm pulling it back onto his flat. That's where I'm getting my advantage. Ready?
Ready.
To get that strike. And it really throws their blade out of the way. And I can do it from either side. So if we're here, well, actually I wouldn't start here, I'd start here. So let's actually do this. We start here. I pull it back. You notice how I'm protecting myself. So if he countercuts my arm, great. Go back, do that again. Bring it forward, there we go.
There.
So we don't even need to be touching, but we both know we're in danger. But he's closed off his line, and I've closed off my line without excessive movement. So I pull back. Now when he goes to countercut me, let's do it again. I turn my sword flat. Do it again. And then I can just cut through. Do it again, one more time. Into the cut at the throat. I can go other places, but that's going to distract him if you cut him in the throat. Do you agree?
I would agree.
There's a book I would suggest, besides John Taylor from 1804, and that is Blades of the British Empire. And I'll put a link to that into the description of this. Can you check to make sure there's no questions? Go ahead and close that. So I would like to say, no, don't say. With that, I'd like to say thank you. I hope you found this instructional. I hope you found this helpful. Remember, there's a distinct difference between fighting with a Napoleonic era 1796 pattern versus a Hungarian saber. They're different weapons. So this is gonna, and they are both significantly different than dueling sabers. What we're talking about with Taylor is an English style. So you're gonna see very similar actions in things like silver and other English masters. With that, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I hope you're all staying safe and you're finding ways to stay sane. Until we are able to get together and train in person again, we will continue these. If you have questions, please post them in the comments section. If you enjoyed what you saw, please share this video and hit the subscribe and the notification icon. Until we are together, stay safe, stay sane, and we'll see you on the other side of this. All the best to you. Boom.
Good to have you all.